Okay, so good morning. We are on Kuf Ayin Aleph. We are in our final week of Batra. I have so enjoyed it. I hope that you have as well. We are still on the bottom of Kuf Ayin Amabet. Let me share my screen and we'll get started. And we're going to have some Rashbam. We'll have one Tosos, I think, but we'll mostly be doing Rashbam. And we'll be discussing Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. So let me share my screen and we can really get started. So yesterday, the Mishnah on Kuf Ayin Amabet provided 2 points of view regarding how a partial loan payment should be handled. Rabbi Yehuda, meaning I owe Stan $100,000, okay? And now I pay him $50,000. And so how much do I owe him now?
You said 50.
If I pay him $50,000 and I owed him $100,000,
50,000.
I owe him $50,000 left. Exactly. So now there are 2 ways that the rabbis in the Mishnah say that we can handle this, because he has a document that says that I owe him $100,000. Wow. But do I still owe him $100,000? No, I don't. So one way that we could handle it is, according to Rabbi Yehuda, I'm going to provide Stan with a new loan document that says instead of me owing him $100,000, I owe him $50,000. And then he'll give me the document that says that I owe him $100,000. And then everything's great. Wow. Because now what does Stan have? Stan has an IOU from me that says that I owe him $50,000. And so that's the amount that I owe him. And I don't have to worry about Stan trying to claim $100,000 from me. Now, that is one possibility. Rabbi Yossi says, now note, in this possibility, it's unclear whether the date in the new document would be the original date of the loan or the current date. Meaning, the question is, and why does the date on the document matter? The date on the document matters because if I sell a piece of property after the date on the document that Stan has, well, then Stan has the ability to take that property away. So if I sell you that property, Mark, you know that I have this loan. Yeah. So you know that if Stan comes to collect that loan and I don't have any money, he's going to be able to take that property away from you, and then you're going to be my creditor because I gave you a guarantee. So that's why the date is important. Yeah. And so it's unclear at the moment whether the date on the new document that I give to Stan is the original date or is it today's date. We'll see that that's going to be clarified. That another Bryce is going to clarify that we're referring to the original date, and which is what Rashbam told us when we learned the Mishnah yesterday. Okay, so that is Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says we replace the document. Rabbi Yossi says, no, we don't need to do that. What we can do is just have Stan hand me a receipt. Wow. That says that I paid him $50,000. And now, if he comes and tries to collect with his $100,000 loan document, what do I tell him? I tell him I already paid him $50,000. Here's the receipt that shows that I paid him $50,000. So that's the 2 approaches. One was replace the document. 2 was get a receipt. And then the Gemara gave us a 3rd view. Rav Huna in the name of Rav, who says that it's not me who replaces the document. It's a court that replaces the document. The court tears up the original document and writes another one with the original date. Wow. And one can understand why. Because if I write the document on some level, even though it's a replacement document, and therefore we're potentially saying that it's legal that I use the earlier date, in general, I'm not allowed to write documents and put on them dates that are earlier than today. And so as a result, that's a crucial point that we will be touching on over the course of today. So now we're going to, as we pick up on the 6th line, end of the 6th line from the bottom of Kuf Ayin Amabet, the Gemara analyzes this third position, this position of Rav Huna in the name of Rav. So, and it asks effectively a question. Amrle Rav Nachman le Rav Huna. Rav Nachman says to Rav Huna, again, Rav Huna is the one who quoted his teacher Rav, who said that in fact we don't have the parties do any receipt, and we don't have the parties rip up any documents, but rather the court will take care of everything, and they rip up the document and they replace the document.
Wow.
But Amri la Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba la Rav Huna. Some people say it wasn't Rav Nachman, it was Rav Yirmiyah. So Ishmiya le Rav ha Braisa Titania Edim Mikarin es Ashtar v'Kozvim lo Shtar Achar Mizman Rishon Hava Hadarbe. That if Rav had heard the following Braisa, that in fact the date that when Rabbi Yehuda, and we're going to quote this entire brisa shortly, but the excerpt from this brisa is telling us that when Rabbi Yehuda says that the witnesses tear up the document and write another document, they use the original date. If we hadn't said that, I'm sure if Rav had known that we were supposed to use the original date with the witnesses, he probably would have agreed with Rebbe Yehuda rather than giving his own opinion. So let's take a look in Rashbam, third line up, middle of the line. Hava Hadarbe, he would have retracted. Rav would have retracted. V'haya moda shahalacha Rabbi Yehuda, and he would have admitted that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. Daha Rav nami hachikamar. That Rav's key point was the following: Demali based in Mali Edim. He doesn't really care about whether it was based in or Edim. What he focused on was the fact that you used the original date.
Wow.
So Amar Le, Rav Huna said back to either Rav Nachman or Rav Yirmiyah. Shmiya Le, no, he had heard this brisa, the lo hadarbe, and he did not retract his viewpoint. And so why did he not retract his viewpoint? So we continue as we turn to the top of Kuf Ayin Amud Aleph, Kuf Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph. So Bishlam Abeidina, it makes sense that we allow a court to rip up the document and then write a new document with the original date, because Alime Afuke Mamona, the court has the power to remove money. As Rashbam points out, top Rashbam, on Kuf Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph, Mikarin, Bishlam Abeidina Mikarin, Umachalifin Achar, Bekotvin Oto Mizman Rishon. It makes sense that the Beis Din will tear up and switch out the document with a new one that has the original date. Litrof Shelo Kedin Mizman Rishon. Deminadin Lo Alim Shtara Lemitrov Elamiyom Shenichtav. That only the court has the power to give a document a date that is earlier than the date that it was written. Because ordinarily, the only power that a document has to collect from property that the debtor, that the borrower sold after the date of the document is if it's after the date of the document. Right. But this new document has the power to go back in time. And only a court has that power. The Ella miyom shenichta ve'elach Ella beitin alime umifkai mamona. But Beis Din has the strength to take money away. De hefker Beis Din hefker. This is one of the famous lines in the Gemara when Beis Din says that something is actually ownerless. They have the power to make it ownerless. So Beis Din has the power to take away money from you, Stan, and give it to Mark if they were to so choose. That's what we saw in Maseches Gittin, Elah Hanachalos, Daf Lamed Vav Amud Bet. So 36b. Okay, but back into the Gemara. A second line, first word on the line in Kuf Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph, Ela Edim. But when it comes to witnesses, Sha'asu Shlichusan, that they've already performed their task. Because when I ask witnesses, I ask Moshe and Mark to draft up a document for me that says I borrowed $100,000 from Stan. They are only allowed to write one of those documents. Because what would happen if you wrote two of the documents, Mark? Do you know what
Be in
would happen?
trouble.
I'd be in trouble because instead of owing, if there are two documents that say I owe Stan $100,000, how much do I end up owing him? $200,000. Exactly right. And that would be bad because how much do I really owe him? Only $100,000. So that's exactly right. So Ella Edim She'aso Shlichusan, once you and Moshe do your job and you write the contract that I owe Stan $100,000, Chosrin ve'osin shluchusan, are you allowed to go back and do it again? No, you can't do it again.
No.
So that's why Rav says that in fact only the court has the right to do this. And I agree too. I think that that this is very, very key. The Gemara asks, well, 1 second, is it really not true? And again, we're on the third line, Kovayan Aleph Amud Aleph, third line, second word on the line. Velo, is it not true? Because listen to what a ruling that happened. V'amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Again, it was said in the name of Rav, and that's who we're talking about. Rav is the one who said this rule that it has to be a court. Eidim kosvin afilu asara shtaros al seda achas. That witnesses can write even 10 documents for a single field. As Rashbam says, V'amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, 1, 2, 3, 5 lines down in the narrow lines of the Rashbam, Misha Avad Shtaro, that somebody who lost their document, V'amar La'edim, and says to witnesses, Kisvu li'acha, write me another document, Chosrin v'kosvin. They are allowed, those witnesses are allowed to write, meaning the witnesses that originally wrote the first document, they're allowed to write a second document. Afilu asara shtaros, they can even do it 10 times, 10 documents. Im avdu zeh. If I'm a kind of person who keeps losing my stuff, I can have them just write document after document. So doesn't that show that witnesses can do their job over and over again? So Rav Yosef said, no, it doesn't. You have to remember a few different things about that story. Bishtar Matana. That story was talking about a gift document. Wow. A gift document is different than a sale document because a gift document, if I give a gift to Stan and then it turns out that I owed you $100,000 and I gave the gift to Stan after I borrowed the $100,000 from you, and I now don't have any money to give you, wow, you can go to Stan and take that field away. But Stan will not have any right to come back to me and get a new field because I gave it to him as a gift. Exactly. And so as a result, that's what we're talking about. Yeah. So therefore, when you get a new document, it doesn't give you any extra power. All it does is it confirms that you're the owner of it. So the Rabba Amar, and Rabba goes further. Rabba says, Bishtar she'einbo achrayus. We could be talking about even a sale document, but we're talking about a sale document that doesn't include a guarantee. Indeed, we saw earlier that we saw a few days ago that if somebody loses a sale document, what will we do for that person? We'll write them a new document. We'll write them a new document that doesn't include the guarantee any longer because we're not going to allow them to end up with two guarantees. And so as a result, that's what we could be talking about. And so as a result, that is not relevant for our case because in our case, the case where we won't let the witnesses do something new, it's where the witnesses would give a document that has the potential to create liability. And that's precisely what Rav Yosef and Rab are saying was not permitted by Rab. So in fact, Rab is totally consistent and therefore everything is wonderful. Let's just do the Rashbam on Rabba Amar. It's 3, 6, 9, 12, 14 or 15 lines down in the narrow lines of the Rashbam, Kufayat Aleph Amud Aleph. The Rabba Amar, Afilu Bishtar Mechira Kamar. Rav, Rav Yehuda de Kosvin Asara, that Rav Yehuda's statement in the name of Rav could have even been about writing 10 documents where the document was a sale document. V'kagon delays be'achrayas, and it's where we're talking about where there was no guarantee in the document. Ukida Amran La'el, and as we saw on Kof Samachet on Mabet, so that's 3 days ago, that we will rewrite the document, but we will exclude the guarantee in it. Amar Rav Nachman La'el, and as Rav Nachman said earlier, Shtara Dinan de Kasvanuhu Lo Migbi Bay, that the document that we are going to write for him, we're not going to allow him to use to collect. So that's when we said that Rav said that you can write the 10 documents. Okay, so the bottom line is that we have now shown that Rav is consistent, and even with this new brisa that says that that the witnesses tear up the document and the witnesses write another document, Rav still believes that it's the court. But now let's go back and let's ask the question, or the Gemara asks the question, as we pick up on the 6th line, my brisa. What is this brisa that you just quoted an excerpt from? Tanya, it's the following. Haresha hayunoshin bo elef zuz. Somebody owes $1,000. So again, I owe Stan $1,000. Ufara mehen chamesh me'ozuz, and I pay 500 of it. Edim mikarin es hashtar, the kosvin lo shtar achar misman rishon. The witnesses tear up the original document and they write a new document from the original time. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's Rabbi Yehuda's statement. Rabbi Yossi Omer, and Rabbi Yossi says, Shtar zeh yehe munoch bimkomo. No, the original document that says that I owe Stan $100,000 stays in Stan's hands. The yichtavu shover, and Stan just writes me a receipt. Ubimnei shnei dvarim amru kosvin shover, and we give 2 reasons for writing a receipt. Achas kadesha Yaakov lefaro. One is in order to encourage payment, and Rashbam explains we're now counting up in the narrow lines from the bottom of the narrow lines, and it's 6, 9, 11 lines up in the narrow lines. Kadesha Yaakov leparo hamalva yikov lelova leparo, that the lender, by not tearing up the document that Stan has that says that I owe him $100,000, that is going to encourage me to pay up. Why? Shadoeg, because I'm going to be concerned. Pen yafsid shovro. Maybe I'll lose the receipt that says I paid Stan already $50,000. And what will happen if I lose the receipt? Now Stan, although it would not be honest of him, could ask for the full amount. V'zeh yotzi shtaro, you're going to take out the full amount, the contract, the tovo kol chovo, and you'll end up getting me to pay the whole amount. So that is the story. Now, and now let's go to the second reason. The achas, and the second reason, another reason for the sages saying that we write a receipt, kadesha yigbam isman rishon, because we want to make sure that Stan has the ability to collect from third parties using the original date. Now, we're going to ask in just a moment. I don't understand. Rabbi Yehuda also said that you could use the original date, that when the witnesses rewrite the document, they use the original date. So that doesn't seem to be any kind of special benefit. Now, we're going to see that in a moment, but Tosfos is going to help us understand what's going on here. If we take a look at the Tosfos Mizman Rishon, so Mizman Rishon, Rabbi Yehuda lo perish la Rabbi Yossi Mizman Rishon. Actually, although that language is in the brisa, Rabbi Yehuda, just as he did in our Mishnah, never actually specified that the time of the beginning of the collection, that when we write a new document, that when the 2 witnesses write a new document, they write it from the original date. Rather, aval braisahi shenuya, the brisa itself taught it to us. B'milsei de Rabbi Yehuda l'fia ha'emes, based on the truth of what Rabbi Yehuda actually said. And this is why Rabbi Yossi responds, saying that maybe the date is also another area of difference. Because now we go back into the Gemara. We're smack in the middle of the Gemara, literally the middle of the middle line of the Gemara on Kuf Ayin Aleph. V'ha Rebbe Yehuda nami mizman rishon kamar. What do you mean? The Gemara asks about that brisa at the end of the brisa, and Rebbe Yossi's statement that another advantage of his approach is that you can collect from the original date. Rebbe Yehuda also says that you use the original date. So Haki Kamar like Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. This is what Rabbi Yossi was saying to Rabbi Yehuda. Im is man rishon. If you're going to try and collect Ka'amrat, if you tell me that when the two witnesses replace the document, they write the original date, well then pligna alach b'chada. Then I argue in one category. I argue that it's better to give a receipt because it empowers the lender to make sure that he collects as fast as possible, because the debtor is going to want to pay up as quickly as possible just in case he loses his receipt. Because if he pays up in full, well, then he tears up the entire document. Imizman sheni kamrat, but if you tell me that actually they write the document based on the current date, well then Ligna alach betarte. Then I argue on you for two reasons. And the second reason is I argue on you because you are inhibiting the ability of the creditor to collect from property that was sold between the original date of the document and today's date. And we don't want to weaken the hand of the lender. So that's the bottom line. That's the brisa. So now we're going to have another brisa. So I'm sorry for not scrolling. So that's what we just covered is item number 2. So now we go to number 3 on the screen, and the Gemara is going to quote another brisa. Tana Rabbanan, Shtar Shizmano Kasav B'Shabbos. It turns out, Oba Asar B'Tishrei. It turns out that a document was written, and we look at the date, and it turns out that it was written on Shabbos, or it was written on Yom Kippur. And Rashbam explains, how could it be that you would have a document that has the date, the 10th day of Tishrei? Everybody knows that the 10th day of Tishrei is Yom Kippur. And everybody knows what day is Shabbos is. So what's the story? So Kagon, the second of the medium wide lines, Kagon b'mekomos shemonim l'chodshei hachama. We're talking about a place like the United States where we don't use the lunar calendar, we use the solar calendar. And maybe the document had on it a solar calendar date. Because of Bishtar, B'tetvav liyarech ploni. And it was written on the document the 15th day of the month of July, of some month in the year. V'kisha anu nizkaken lechavin matai ira yom tedvav shel oto chodesh. And now we go back and we just say, what day was the 15th? So nimsa onaso biyom shamas. We find that day was Shabbos. O biyom asiri l'tishrei, or was on Tisha B'av. Dahainu yom kippurim, and that's Yom Kippur. V'akol yodim shelo nichtav lo b'Shabbos v'lo b'Yom Kippur. We all know that the document could not have been written on Shabbos or Yom Kippur because you're not allowed to write on those days. V'nimsa shelo nichtav ba'oso yom. So hamochiach b'shtar. So it's clear that the document wasn't written on the date that was written in the contract, in the document. So Ella o mukdam hu upasel. So either it's going to be a predated document, meaning it was really written on the 20th day of Tishrei, and it was predated to the 10th day of Tishrei. Well, that's not a valid contract. You're not allowed to predate a document, because if you write on a document an earlier date, now instead of not being, so let's say I sell my property to Stan on the 11th day of Tishrei, and I borrow the $100,000 from you on the 20th day of Tishrei, you should not be able to collect from the land that I sold to Mark. But if we write on the document the 10th day of Tishrei as the date of the document, now all of a sudden you can. So that's why we won't, any document where we know that it was written too early a date, that's going to be invalid. And so the question is, do we treat it as a date that was done too late, meaning that originally you and I signed this agreement on in Elul. But we write on it the date that turns out to be the 10th day of Tishrei, that turns out to be Yom Kippur, and we'll say it's all right, it's fine, because it's a document that has been post dated. So what happens in that situation? Back in the Gemara. So now, so Rabbi Yehuda is going to say the following. We're now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines up. So star mu'ukarhu. So v'kasher divrei Rabbi Yehuda, that Rabbi Yehuda says that this document, we're going to answer the question: was it a predated document or a post-dated document? It was post-dated. Just like we do post-dated checks, right? You can write the check today, and you'll write it with the date of in June, or July, and January, and and the people, because now it's December, and people will then only be able to use it in the future. Okay, but Rabbi Yossi posel. Rabbi Yossi says it's not a valid document. Amar lo Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says to Rabbi Yossi, "V'halo mazeh b'olofanecha b'tzipori." 1 second. You had a situation like this that came to you when your court was in Sipori, v'hichsharta, and you document was a valid document. Amar lo, so Rabbi Yossi responded, "Kehichsharti b'zeh." When I ruled that this was valid, I ruled that this was valid. So what in the world does that mean? That's very confusing. So take a look in the Rashbam, 7 lines up. Amar le, from the very bottom of the Rashbam. Amar le kehichsharti b'zeh shekasov zmano b'Shabbos u'b'Yom Kippurim. When the date on the document turned out to be Yom Kippur or Shabbos, hichsharti. That was when I said it was kosher. Because it's obvious on its face that it was not written at that particular time. Because we don't write documents on Shabbos and Yom Kippur. So as a result, everybody knows that this is a post-dated document, and as a result, the date of the document is going to not be meaningful to allow certain games to be played, because everybody will know that it's a post-dated document. The lo nafik milei churba, and we're not going to have some terrible outcome as a result. Kidul kaman, as we will talk about very shortly in the Gemara. Aval b'me'uchar ba'alma. But when a document is post-dated, and as a result, I write some date in January that is not on Shabbos and is not Yom Kippur, well, now all of a sudden, it's Shizmano Katuv B'Yom Roy L'Ktiva, and it's a date that the document could have been written on. V'lo Yivada Im Me'ucharhu Im Lav, and we don't know whether it's a post-dated document or a correctly dated document. Bahahu Paligna Alach. On that, that's where I argue with you, Rabbi Yossi says to Rabbi Yehuda. Upasilna v'taima lekaman. And I say that is puzzle, and that's what we're going to explain. Rabbi Yehuda nami kamar. Well, 1 second. If in fact he was saying that if in fact the date on the document is Yom Kippur or Shabbos, that it's going to be valid, that is in and of itself what Rabbi Yehuda says. So what's the argument? So Rabbi Padas, this is the argument. Hakol modim, everybody agrees. Shem who's kaknu la'onaso shel shtar v'nimtses onaso mechuvenes l'shabbos o be'asara b'tishrei. If we look at the document and we calculate that the date on the document is Shabbos or Yom Kippur, shishtar me'uchar hu v'kasher. So then we're going to say it's a post-dated document and it's valid because it's obvious on its face that the date is wrong. Below nechlaku, where do Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi disagree? They only disagree ela b'shtar me'uchar ba'alma, a regular document that's been post-dated, where the date that on which it's post-dated could have been the date that it was written. The Rabbi Yehuda l'taimei. Rabbi Yehuda thinks according to his reasoning. Damar ein kotzin shover. Rabbi Yehuda said, as we saw in our Mishnah, which is why we're bringing this here, we don't write receipts, right? Rabbi Yehuda is worried that we're forcing the borrower to keep track of the receipt, and we don't want to do that. And so as a result, since we don't write receipts, lo nafik minei churva, there's nothing bad that's going to happen. But Rabbi Yossi l'taimei, Rabbi Yossi goes follows his reasoning. Damar kozin shover, he says we do write a receipt. V'nafik minei churva, and now something bad could happen. So what is the bad thing that could happen? Thankfully, Rashbam helps us out here. So let's take a look at the Rashbam. We're going to be in the narrow lines from the top of the Rashbam. We're now on Kuf Ayin Aleph Amud Bet, and it's 3, 6, 9, 11 lines down. L'taimei de Amar Kosvin Shover. Again, Rabbi Yossi says that we do write a receipt. So Hecha de Para Mitzar Chovo, that if I pay Stan $50,000, so I borrowed the money in January, and now, but you wrote in the document the date of June, okay, and I paid you $50,000 in April. Okay, or I could have even paid you the entire amount in April. The Toan Malva Irkas story, and you claim that you lost the document. So Kedim Mefarish Lakaman, as we'll see in a moment. Kos and Shover, and now you write a receipt for me. So what you write a receipt for me that I paid the whole thing or half of it. But the document that you're holding that says I owe you $100,000 is dated in June. And what's the date that you have on the receipt to me? April. So now this star we have to say that the post-dated document has to be invalid. Because you could say that you lost it. Below irkas hecha de parachatzi. And same thing if I paid half of half of the debt. Because shover lelova yakol hamalva lahotzi acharei star chovo. Now in June you can bring out the document and say, "Oh, you owe me $100,000," and I'll say, "Well, I paid you that $100,000 back in March and April." But the date on the document that you're holding is after the date of my receipt. Yomer, and you're going to say, "Mammon acher who's that?" Oh, that's a different loan. I loaned you the money a different time. Shilavisa mimeni acharekein. You borrowed from me other money afterwards. V'yigba kol chavo, and you'll end up being able to collect the whole amount. Mishalem shaharei ein yadua shehu me'uchar, because you can't tell from the document that it was a post-dated document. Aval shtar shekazas mana b'Shabbos basar b'Tishrei lo matzi l'meimer hashtahu de yezefes minai. You can't tell me that now's the date that Yom Kippur is the date that I borrowed the money from you, because nobody will believe that. So as a result, everybody knows that that's a post-dated document. And so as a result, now when I say that my earlier payment was for this document, I'll be believed because everybody knows that the document's not correct. But when it comes to Rabbi Yehuda, he says, you don't get to collect, Stan, unless you have the document in front of us. And so as a result, it's only by having the document in your hands and allowing us to replace it, because we're not going to write a receipt. We have to replace the document. That's the only time you can collect. And so as a result, if you say you lost the document, you lose out completely. So I will just say, okay, I'll pay you when you find the document. And so as a result, that's why it won't be a problem to Rabbi Yehuda, and it would be a problem to Rabbi Yossi, but therefore Rabbi Yossi says that we're not going to allow post-dated documents. So now Rav Huna is going to suggest that really maybe the argument is not as big as we originally thought. That maybe the following, Amar Rav Huna, braid to Rav Yoshua, Afilu Laman to Amar Kosin Shover. Even according to Rav Yossi, who says that we do write a receipt, Hani Mili Apalka. We will only write a receipt if the payment that I make is for part of the loan. Aval Akule, if I pay for the whole thing, low. Then I won't make. Then even Rabbi Yossi says I won't do a receipt. And actually, Stan has to have the document in his hand in order to be collected. The lohi, but you know what? It's not true. It's not true. Afilu akuli kasvinan will write a receipt. Rabbi Yossi believes that we will write a receipt even for the entire loan, meaning that it's okay for a lender to have lost his documents. That's how powerful Rabbi Yossi wants to try and help out our lender. Sukihad Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef. Because listen to the following story of Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef. Hava Masik Bey Zuze Rabbi Abba. He had lent money to Rabbi Abba. Also lekamei de Rabbi Chanina Bar Papi. He came to Rabbi Chanina Bar Papi. Amrlei, and he said, Havli Zuzai, give me my money. Amrlei, and Rabbi Abba respond, Havli Shtarai Ushkal Zuzach. You got to give me the document, and then you get the money, because they were holding like Rabbi Yehuda that says we don't write a receipt, and so as a result, you need to give me the document back if you want your money. Amrlei, Rabbi Yitzchak says, Shtarach Ir Kasli. 1 second, I lost your document. So Ektablach Tabra, I'll write you a receipt. Amrlei, Rabbi Abba said, Ha Rav Shmuel to Amri Tarbayu ain't Kosman Shover. Well, 1 second, Rav and Shmuel both agree with Rabbi Yehuda and say that we don't write a receipt. And we don't allow, and therefore we won't allow Stan to collect if he doesn't show me his document. So Amar Man Yahiv. So now Rabbi Chanina Bar Papi says, Man Yahiv Lan Ma'afre de Rav Shmuel Raminan Ba'ainin. If we, it would be great if we had the dust of Rav and Shmuel that we could put some in our eyes. Meaning, I think they're amazing. But notwithstanding the fact that I think they're amazing, how Rabbi Yochanan v'Haresh Lakish to Amri Tarbayu Kosen Shover. Notwithstanding the fact that Rav and Shmuel say hold like Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, they both hold like Rabbi Yossi, and they say we do write a receipt. So v'chein ki asa Ravin Amar Rabbi Eli. And similarly, when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he said that Rabbi Eli said in the name of Rabbi Eli, Kosvin Shover, we do write a receipt. Umistabrin to Kosvin Shover. And it makes sense that we should write a receipt. Now the Gemara comments on this whole thing as we are coming to the conclusion from a Psak Din perspective. And my apologies again for not scrolling. Okay. Mistabra the Kosvin Shover. It makes sense that we write receipts. The Isakataita ain't Kosvin Shover, because if you say that we don't write receipts, Avid Shtaro Shelzeh, if Stan loses the document, Yochal Hala V'chade. So then I'm gonna have a holiday. I'm gonna eat and rejoice and be wonderful because I won't have to pay Stan ever because he doesn't have the document. Maskiflo Abaye says, 1 second, that's not a proof. The Elamai, what are you gonna say? Kosvin Shover, we write a receipt, but then 1 second, Avid Shover Shelzeh, if I, the borrower, lose the receipt, Yochel Halavachadi. Now Stan gets to rejoice. So somebody's going to get to rejoice in our situation. So no, in the end, we're going to respond to Abaye. Amrle Rava. Rava responds to Abaye in yes. You know what? It's okay for the lender to rejoice about the misfortunes of the borrower that he lost the receipt. Because the pasuk in Mishlei says, as we saw this, I think it was yesterday that we cited this the first time, Eved, and it was in the Rashbam, Eved lova leish malva. A borrower becomes a slave to the lender, and so as a result, so that is the principle that we're going to apply. And so as a result, and this is all in order to encourage Stan to do lending. Because if we took a much harsher stance, it would prevent Stan from lending because he wouldn't want to lend, because if he lost the document, he would lose out on everything. Yeah. So very, very key halacha. And this is how we follow. We follow that you do write a shover, that if Stan loses a document and he can prove, still has to prove, or I have to admit that I owe him the money, he can collect and he writes me a receipt. And I have to hold on to that receipt essentially forever in order to be able to prevent anything bad from happening if he were to find his
Yeah,
original
it still
document.
stands today. You have people who are supply siders, and you have people who take the other.
Yeah, no, that very true. But the bottom line is that in this particular instance, it's not quite supply side, because the point is that we're facilitating the work that needs to be happening
Right.
by the people who
Which is
don't
the other
have.
side.
And remember that the loans that we're talking about are all no interest loans.
Right.
So it's very kind of Stan to loan me the $100,000, because he's not going to make money on his money. The only way he can make money on his money is if he puts it at true risk, not risk of failure to pay, but at risk of the business not working. Meaning we can do what's called a heter iska, where he participates in the business with me,
Right.
and now he'll share in the profits and
Which is
etc.
not interest.
Yeah, which is not interest. Exactly. That's the idea. Even though we can set a target goal for what you should get paid, meaning even though, and so as a result, we can have that you will get paid at least a certain rate of return as long as their profits are above that. So the point is that there's ways to make it a little like interest, but you're, at the end of the day, your money is at risk, because if the business is unsuccessful, you don't get paid back in full. Okay, so that leads us to the next brisa, and the next brisa returns to the discussion of post-dated documents. So let's take a look. Tanan
If he has, he's writing. If you,
get a question?
if you on the previous discussion, if the borrower pays off on April 1st, and the lender says I comes to him on June 1st and says you owe me
$100,000.
but isn't the lender holding the original document that says that your loan is due on June 1st?
No, it's not that the loan is due on June 1st. June 1st is written at the top of the page as being the date of the document, because when we wrote the document, when Stan and I wrote the original document that said I owed him $100,000, we put in a later date. And we put in a date that unfortunately is going to leave me high and dry, because I paid him in April, but we put a date in the document that says I owe him $100,000. The origination date says June 1st. Meaning it says June 1st. On this day, David Schwartz borrowed $100,000 from Stan, and now the point is that I paid him back in April, but now comes June 1st. It looks like, even though the document was post-dated, it looks like it was dated today, and June 1st is not a Shabbos in that particular year, and so as a result, Stan can try and collect from me.
Well, I'm a little puzzled. How are we writing a document on June 1st? How do they agree to write the two of them? I mean, obviously they're there, they're witnesses. What, to agree to write the document on June 1st, when in fact the return of money was made on April 1st? How are they?
Because I made a mistake. The point is that, look, in those days, not everybody understood how the dating system worked. I may not be the most sophisticated person, and so I wrote a wrong date on the document. First of all, I don't know about others, but often we'll get confused. We'll think confused between July and January. You can intend to write one and wrote the other, and then we said, you know what, I wrote July 1st when I meant January 1st, but you know what? It's okay, because post-dated documents are all right. So even though I wrote July 1st, instead of January 1st on this document dated 2025, it'll be okay. But then I forget that we post-dated the document. And now I come and I say, I want to pay you back. But Stan remembers the fact that it was post-dated, and he says, oh, I'm sorry, I lost the document. Here's a receipt for your payment. And the receipt is dated April 1st. And so now, as a result, when Stan comes, it looks like a new loan document. That's the problem. That's why, according to Rebbe Yehuda, we could avoid this problem because we don't write receipts. And unless Stan gives me the original document back, I don't pay him anything. Alternatively, according to Rebbe Yossi says we're not going to ever allow post-dated documents. And so as a result, that document is not going to be a valid document. And so as a result, we're going to essentially put at risk Stan's whole $100,000 because he may still try to pull this shtick. But the fact is that if as soon as I know that it's a post-dated document, I'm going to say it's not a valid document. He can't bring it. Now in April, if I remember that it's a post-dated document, I don't owe him anything. So as a result, the entire document is invalid. So that's how Rabbi Yossi deals with the situation. So
Did you mean when you said here's a receipt for your payment? Did you mean to say here's a receipt for my payment?
Yes, he says, here's a receipt for your payment. That was a quotation. Yes, so it was
why would he say here's a receipt for your payment? Person would say here's a receipt for my payment. I paid you back.
No. The person who receives the payment gives the person who paid a receipt. The person who paid doesn't give a receipt.
Okay, that was at that time. All right. Yeah, okay, but later on, the person comes back and said, here's my receipt. I paid
exactly.
you.
I come back. Yes. In July, I say, here's the receipt that you gave me.
Right.
Here's the receipt that you gave me. And he says, yes, well, that receipt says April. The date on this document is July 1st. I lent you a new money.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right. So let's continue on. Tanan Hassam, we have a Mishnah. So the Gemara now returns to the discussion of post-dated documents, citing a Mishnah in Shvius and demonstrating that allowing post-dating documents is permitted only if we do not write receipts. Again, connecting the two concepts of post-dated documents and receipts. If we allow post-dated documents, then we can't allow receipts. If we if we require receipts, then we can't allow post-dated documents. So, Tanan Hassam, Shtarech.
That battle.
So we're going to say that well, you know what? Give me 2 more seconds and you're going to see who wins. Okay. Tanan Hassam, Shtarichov Kudamin Psulin, that if you write a predated document, as we saw at the very beginning of today, we're going to say that it's puzzle. But if you post-date it, Sharon, then it's going to be valid. Then it's kosher. Rav Hamnuna said, Lo shanu el shtari helva. That's only true when it comes to loan documents. Aval shtari mekaku memkar. But when it comes to sale documents, afilu mu'ucharin nami psulin. Even post-dated sale documents are not going to be valid. My time, why? Zimin demizabin le arabinisan. Maybe somebody will buy the land in Nissan, so I'm going to sell. So Stan will sell me a piece of property in Nissan because of Leiba Tishrei, and he's going to write accidentally that he sold me the property in Tishrei. Umisramile zuze beni beni. And in the meantime, Stan will happen to have some money on hand. And what will he do with that money? He'll buy back the property from me. So now I write to him in between this, I write to him in Sivan a document that says I sold you this property in Sivan, V'chimati Tishrei. But now when Tishrei comes, he wrote me a document that says that he sold me the property in Tishrei. So Mapikle, I'm going to take out the original document. I bought it back from you. And so as a result, I'll end up with my original money and the property. Boy, did I win. So that's why we won't allow that to happen. We won't allow post-dated documents when it comes to sales transactions. Well, one second, well, then one second, even with loan documents, why don't we have the same concern? Maybe it's going to happen in Nissan that I borrow the money from Stan because of Leishtari b'Tishrei, and I'll accidentally write to him that I borrow the money in Tishrei. Umitrami lezuze beni beni, and I'll get the money in Sivan, and I'll give him back uparole, and I'll pay him back. V'amrole, and now havli shtare, and I'll tell him, give me my contract, give me my IOU. V'amrole, and he'll say, Irkutsk, I'm sorry, I lost it because of Lake Tavra, and he'll write a receipt for me. And what date will be on the receipt? Sivan will be on the receipt. V'chimadi Zimne, and now when Tishrei comes around, Mapiklei, he's going to try and take out the document, but Amrlei, and he'll say, Honey Hashdahu Dizaves Minai, you borrowed this money from me now, so I want to get paid back now. Kasavar Ain Kosin Shobrin. So Rav Hamnuna explains, well, in that case, we don't write a receipt with respect to a loan document, and so that's how come we don't have this concern. And so the bottom line is that we have these two concepts: no receipt and post-dated documents and are kosher, or yes receipts and post-dated documents are not kosher. But we've got a problem. And this problem is where we're going to begin tomorrow. The Gemara is going to say, 1 second, we allow post-dated documents
Right.
and we write receipts.
No.
We said,
No.
we've been saying all day today that we don't do those two things. So how in the world can we do these two things that seem to be inconsistent? So for that, we're going to have to stay tuned tomorrow. We're leaving with a cliffhanger. The halacha is, I believe that the halacha is that we do write receipts, and we do allow post-dated documents. So I'm allowed to write Stan a check that says January 1st is the date of the check because of 2025, exactly, because I'm allowed to do that. And if Stan doesn't have the loan document, he's allowed to say, listen, I don't have the loan document, here's a receipt. But how do we deal with now the problem? Because maybe Stan and I will end up in a bad situation where it'll look like I borrowed money from him twice and I have to pay him twice. And that's what we'll pick up with tomorrow. But at the moment, Stan is the winner.
Wouldn't he have to pay
Unlucky.
twice if we allow for post-dated documents?
If we allow post-dated documents and we allow receipts, then all of a sudden now I could end up having to pay Stan twice, because Stan will say that he unfortunately lost the loan document and instead gives me a receipt. The receipt will say Sivan in it, but now it comes Tishrei, he takes out the document and says, okay, now it's time for you to pay up. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I paid you back in Sivan. See, here's the receipt that says I paid you back in Sivan. And he's like, well, this document says Tishrei. So I don't know what you're talking about. That was a different loan. You borrowed from me money again. So as a result, now all of a sudden he has a valid document and is going to be able to collect twice, because we allow post-dated documents and we're allowing receipts. That's the question that is our cliffhanger.
Well, bein kach, if we allow receipts or don't allow receipts, if the lender produces a later document, a document dated later, then one could, in this case, one could collect twice.
No. So the reason that Stan won't be able to collect twice is because now I come to pay him in Sivan. And what does Stan say? He says, David, listen, I'm sorry, I lost the document. When he can't write a receipt for me, so what do I tell him in Sivan? Because he can't write a receipt. Great. I'm sorry that I'm not going to pay you back now. But when you find the document, that's when I'll pay you back. And so as a result, now he can't collect twice, because the only time he's ever going to collect is when he can actually produce the document. That's why receipts are so crucial to creating the problem. The only time we have a problem is if we allow Stan to say, listen, you know you owe me the money. I don't have the document. Here's a receipt. If we allow Stan to write a receipt, now all of a sudden he can bring out the document in Tishrei. But when we don't allow him to write a receipt, what we mean by that is that Stan only can collect if he produces the original document. Wow. Until he produces the original document, I don't even have to pay him. And so
but didn't we say earlier in this case that if he comes to me in June, that comes in June, creditor comes in June 1, he said we're not going to allow these post-dated documents, right? If a person pays off in April.
That was Rebbe Yossi. Rebbe Yossi says that we allow receipts, but we don't allow post-dated documents. Where we're going to begin tomorrow is by saying, hey, I don't understand. We do allow post-dated documents and we do allow receipts. So that's not consistent with either Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Yossi, and it's a situation where we could potentially lead to problems. And that's why I used it as a cliffhanger to encourage you to participate in tomorrow's daf.
Tell me, well, what's the problem with if we write a receipt, document receipt, let's say what document on October 1st, and then we find out that October 1st was Yom Kippur. Suppose the person wrote this on Motzei Yom Kippur, which happens to be the person looks on October 1 was Shabbat, there was Yom Kippur. And you go back and look on the calendar. Oh, it was Yom Kippur, and the person come and the original and the writer of the
Excellent
document
question.
says yes, it was October 1st, but I wrote it on Motzei Shabbat, the Motzei Yom Kippur.
100%. And if in fact that were the case, that's the one problem that I have with the Rashbam's explanation, right? The Rashbam's explanation said that, of course, the person didn't actually write the 10th day of Tishrei on the document. He must have written a solar calendar day. So either Rashbam was referring to somehow, I don't know whether whether anybody ever did this, but a solar calendar day that began at nighttime. So that the time is consistent, because you're absolutely right. If part of the day is a time when you could write the document, so then that shouldn't be an obvious problem on the document. You're absolutely right. And so it must be that it's clear the implication of the Gemara is that the date on the document is completely a day that it was Shabbos. So maybe let's say it was the middle day of a 3-day Yontif. And so that we could deal with a situation like that. But you're absolutely right that effectively, if there was a particular calendar day in the way that we as Americans think of calendar days, you're absolutely right that doesn't fit with the problem that the Gemara was raising.
Sometimes I often write my my checks on Motzei Shabbat. I have a little bit of free time.
Yes, 100%. I totally understand. So, like I said, as long as you're using the actual calendar date, the English calendar date, where it is currently an accurate time to say that you can write a check because it's Motzei Shabbos, so then you're absolutely fine. I don't think that's the situation that the Gemara is talking about. But if you were to write on the check the middle date of a 3-day Yontif, so then it would be impossible. Then that date is not a possible date on which you could have written it, and then everybody would know that must be a post-dated document, and so as a result, even Rabbi Yossi would agree that post-dated document is kosher. All right, we will pick up, God willing, from there tomorrow, Motzei Shabbos, presumably with Ellie, and again, usually about 45 minutes after Shabbos. Keep an eye on the WhatsApp to see the precise time, and look forward to continuing our learning together. God willing, next time we meet, next time I'm leading this, will be the final daf of Bava Batra this coming Wednesday. Very exciting. A little sad for me because I have loved the Bavas. This has been really, really wonderful, but also nice to learn something new. So looking forward to continuing our learning together. Have a great Shabbos.